They Never Learn by Layne Fargo is a twisty revenge fantasy novel about Scarlett Clark, an exceptional English professor at the private Gorman College. In her spare time, Scarlett moonlights as a serial killer of men who assault women and go unpunished. When the administration notices the school's unusually high body count, Scarlett insinuates herself into the investigation and charms the woman in charge. Meanwhile, Gorman freshman Carly Schiller is finally free of her abusive father and coming out of her shell thanks to the friendship of her outgoing roommate Allison. But when Allison is assaulted at a frat party, Carly becomes obsessed with making the attacker pay for his crimes. Welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite book. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and my guest today is the co-host of the Thrillers by the Book Club pod, Olivia Day. Olivia is a longtime lover of thrillers, crime, and mystery stories, and a graduate of the International Thriller Writers Online Thriller School. Despite the rather grim themes of the book we're discussing, Olivia and I had a lot of laughs as we discussed why They Never Learn is the best book ever. Hi, Olivia. Welcome to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are the co-host of the Thrillers by the Book Club pod. I've had your partner on the show twice, Chelsea Hoffman. Mm-hmm. And as we were discussing before we hit record, she freaks me out. She's like bubbly, cheerful, wonderful, delightful woman who loves stabby books.
Yeah.
This is the first time you and I have met. It seems like you're the same, I guess, huh?
I mean, I was a cheerleader in high school, if that tells you anything. So that gives you kind of like perspective of the personality here. But yeah, no, love a thriller, love a good murder book. Give me a serial killer any day.
Tell me how you became a reader.
Well, my parents were big readers when I was growing up. And I remember we were like super, super poor, like well below poverty line, super poor. So in the summer times, one of the things my mom would do, we go to the library. So I have a huge soft spot for libraries because it was like an escape place. So we would go every week to the library and I would get all the books. I think I read like all of the like Sweet Valley High and Goosebumps and all of those things. And then I moved on pretty quickly to Fear Street, like R.L. Stine Fear Street and Christopher Pike and things like that. Then I started reading what my mom was reading, which was like Sidney Sheldon, Sandra Brown, and stuff like that. So eventually then started getting into adult reading. And then as I got into high school, my mom and I would just switch books. Like we would be like, okay, here's the new one from Catherine Coulter. You should read it. And that kind of thing, like Patricia Cornwell, things like that. So those like old, like 90s, like mid to late 90s authors. And then I kind of fell off from reading, like did my own life situation, whatever. And then about 5 years ago, I was like, I really miss reading. And then I just like started reading again. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these amazing new authors that are out here. Like there's Karen Slaughter. This was like Karen Slaughter was not out when I was reading before. And now she's like this, and same thing with JT Ellison. And now they've got these huge catalogs that I'm a big fan of. And so that's been really fun, just trying to get like back into it. But it's almost always been mostly mystery, thriller, horror kind of situations. So
what draws you to the exciting books?
I think it's that the thing, first of all, I don't like crying.
I love crying. I cry every day.
Yeah, right. This book's so beautiful. It made me cry. And I'm just like, oh my God, get away from me. Like I can't, no. So there's that. So that doesn't really happen too much in these books. And then also it's such an escape. Like if I'm in my lifetime, if I am lucky, I will never run into a serial killer, knock on wood, right? Like that. So it's like, it's such a fantasy kind of thing. And I get like dragons are fantasy too. I don't know why, but this just works for me. I'm also really into true crime too. So like I spend lots of time listening to true crime stuff and watching it. Like what happens if I'm going out and I'm walking by myself, like I feel confident or I don't feel confident based upon like how much I'm paying attention and awareness and all of these things.
Do you think that's what it is this desire to take back power and to understand motive, or is it something else?
No, I definitely think that's a big part of it because it's like the majority of victims that are out there in violent crimes that are outside of like your standard gun violence, and I hate to say that like standard, but
Yeah.
like these more brutalized kind of crimes are typically the victims are women. And a lot of times they're women of color, they're women who are sex workers, and they're the forgotten in society. And I think that for everybody, for a lot of women, going and educating ourselves about like what happened here, it is intriguing because it's like, wow, what would make somebody actually do that? Like get to that point? What was their life like to get to that point? And then on the other side is like, well, these victim stories need to be told too. So I get a little bit weird with true crime. Like I love it, but then I'm always like, how much of this am I participating in re-victimizing the family?
What do you think is the difference between honoring victims and getting justice and when it veers into victimization? Like, can you define that?
Glorifying serial killers to the point of like, people have, like Dahmer tattooed on them or Bundy tattooed and things like, no. There's like, I know that there's a serial killer coloring book that's like on Amazon that I've seen a lot of people talking about. And I'm just like, that's not okay.
So gross.
Not okay. Like, I get that I understand I'm a part of this, the cog in this wheel, but I also am like, no, that at that point, now we're just glorifying. And that's not like understanding what got them to that point and what their lives were.
Yeah. And I don't know where the line, I guess the line is when the public embraces it that much that people get into it as a personality. That's where it starts to freak me out and worry me.
Well, and I think too, for me, it's also if there are family members that are speaking out that they don't like something and they're uncomfortable with it, then I'm like automatically, I won't watch it or whatever. So for example, I'd already watched the Dahmer show on Netflix with Evan Peterson, I think is his name. I'd already watched that because I thought I'd heard it was more of like from the point of view, like with the neighbors. And I was like, okay, that would be really interesting. Right. But then the family was really upset. And I was like, okay, well, I wish I'd known that first because I wouldn't have watched it. But there's there's a documentary on Netflix about the Cecil Hotel. And I started watching it. And then the people who were coming up were like these web sleuths. So it was like people not involved in solving the crime. And they were like people that are like myself that are just like kind of quote unquote true crime experts because they spend a lot of time researching it and reading it and all of this stuff, but they're not actually involved with the family or with the law enforcement in any way of actually solving the crime. And those people were on that show. And like, as soon as I started watching it, and I was like, this is not even people that are associated with this victim that they were talking about. And I was like, I'm out. Because at this point, like now there's not a psychologist that's coming in and explaining something. There's not a family member or a law enforcement or whatever who they were like firsthand involved. These are like people telling a story that are theories. Like, then I'm like, it just gets weird. I don't know. And and again, I'm like 100% like I'm a walking contradiction because I will still like read true crime, watch true crime, listen to it all the time. And then I also love the way that technology has changed. And for me, reading mystery books in the 90s all the way through to now, and then also like watching true crime stuff, that changed from the way that they were able to find people, be able to capture people, stop them, and people were actually being brought to justice is so fascinating because when they first started out, I remember, like the first Patricia Cornwell book, Case Scarpetta, is like they're using fax machines and stuff, right? I think the work that detectives do are like, it's incredible to me, the fact that they like are going and they face down these people and they have a real life mystery. Like as I've started learning how to write myself, like mysteries are hard. Like this is, it's a hard thing, not just to write, but like in real life, like it is arduous and difficult. And I think that we can do more to honor some of those heroes that are doing like amazing things in bringing justice to families, preventing future crimes, things like that.
Tell me about your own writing. What do you write?
Thrillers. So I've written one book right now. It's not published. I don't have an agent. I'm still like super early. I'm aspiring author stage, but yeah, no, it's fun. I love getting to talk to other readers about thriller books, because then I'm like, okay, don't do that. They did not like that twist.
When you are writing, who are you thinking of? Who are you most influenced by?
I would say Karen Slaughter for me is like a huge one. So the reason why is because she She writes a lot about really dark things, and it does not pull punches when it comes to graphic violence, particularly about graphic violence against women. And that's not really the direction I want to go in, but the idea that I feel like she opened the door to say women can write about graphic violence and it be still a good, compelling story and still be emotional and still like we don't have to hold back and pull any punches. Like we can be just as dark, I guess you could say, as other writers can. And that's one of the things I appreciate about it. And I was reading an article, or actually on her website recently, where she was saying that she has these really graphic, violent sexual assault scenes, and they're pretty bad. And she was like, it was a matter of taking the power back for women, being able to say like, this is what happened, but you're writing it kind of from that woman's perspective and you're taking the power back over it. And I just thought that was really interesting. But basically, I love she writes a really good mystery. It's fast paced, it's dark, it's dark, it's dark. And I like that.
Do you have a favorite Karen Slaughter book?
Pretty Girls is probably my favorite. And that one's about two sisters that were estranged, and then one of the sisters' husbands dies, and then they find out a bunch of things about the husband that they didn't know before. That was pretty bad. So
those husbands, I'll tell you.
They really are.
It won't shock you to know that I don't read a lot of Karen Slaughter. That probably
I would imagine not. You know what's funny is that, so I saw what we were talking about coming on here, and I was like, what book do I want to read? And I saw that you had like either you posted or Chelsea posted the exchange you guys had about like the haunted house. I was like, well, clearly don't pick a Karen Slaughter. Like that's mean. That's way too violent. So I went with something a little bit like that is like in the realm, but also pretty psychological thrillery. So,
it's so hard because the point of the podcast is my guest favorite book, but I don't make a secret of what a fraidy cat I am. And so I do often wonder, like, are people toning it down? And then I always figure if someone picks something really genuinely too terrifying for me, I will just say this was too scary.
That's the thing. Yeah.
I couldn't.
And you know what? I'm a huge proponent of DNFing. If something is not working for you, it's like what I said earlier, if it feels good, right? So just do it feels good. And if it's not working for you, DNF it. It's not a big deal. There are a million other books out there. Like, just don't be an asshole to the author. Otherwise, do whatever you want.
Right. Exactly. So let's tell our listeners about this book that you chose, They Never Learn by Layne Fargo. Do you remember how you found it?
I am I'm just a sucker for Bookstagram. I'm fairly certain I saw it on a BookTube video or a Bookstagram video, most likely. Or I very likely could have Googled female serial killer books. That sounds like really something I would have done. So it would either came out one of those ways. I don't know, but I love it. I love this book. It's so fun.
Can you tell our listeners what it's about?
Yeah. So this is about an English professor named Scarlett Clark, who is a serial killer on a campus. And that's not a secret. It's like right up front in the beginning, you find out, because she kills someone like on the first page. And so what she is, it's very full of rage and a lot of feminine rage, which I think is really interesting. So basically she kills men who do bad things on campuses and can be, teachers, students, whatever, but these are men that are doing bad things that are awful to women and victimizing women on the campus. She alludes to she's done it to other places as well, but at least for sure on the campus of the college that they're at. So anyway, so Scarlett is kind of the lead. We're following her, and she's going on her life. She's doing great, getting all of her kills in. She's very successful in her work. And then all of a sudden with her last one, they've decided to open up a task force to start looking and seeing are there trends? What's going on? Why are there so many suicides on campus? Why are there so many things? Because they don't always look like they're a murder, right? So she integrates herself into the investigation with the lead investigator named Nina. And then, it kind of goes off from there. Meanwhile, on the other side of it, we are seeing a young student, freshman. Her name is Carly Schiller, and she's just trying to survive her freshman year. And lo and behold, she and her friend go out, and her friend is sexually assaulted. And so she also has that feeling of rage and frustration, and really wants to turn these fantasies of revenge into reality. And so you're kind of following her along as well. So Yeah, it's a fun story.
Tell me what you like about this.
I kind of like that it's just like an unhinged female serial killer.
But see, I
Like,
thought she was very, very hinged. She
yeah,
was so controlled.
she is, but I think on the other side of it, you have to be a little unhinged to be like, okay, I'm going to plan that I'm going to sneak in and I'm going to put rat poison in this guy's water or Gatorade. Don't get me wrong, I think all the men deserved it. Like there was like, okay, I'm down for that. I feel like I'm going to get in so much trouble. I mean, I love men, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the men in this book were really bad. And so I like that it's just, again, kind of like taking the power back and it's flipping the dynamic. For so long, we only read books that are about like men who are the perpetrators against women. And I love that this is a woman perpetrating against men who can be victims just as easily as women can be. And women can be just as dangerous as men can be. Just watching these women as they're kind of trying to navigate through their feelings and the way that they feel and deal with rage is pretty interesting.
Yeah, the book confused me so much because it's that morally gray thing that really twisted me. Because obviously, murder is bad.
Murder's bad, yeah.
But like you sit there and go, okay, well, she's only murdering the unrepentant and the unpunished rapists. And I mean, yeah, murder is still bad, but it's not quite as bad when she explains it that way.
Like, so I think about this as Dexter, right? Did you ever watch Dexter?
Of course not.
No. Okay, no. Great. Well, he's a serial killer who works in a police department as a blood spatter expert, but he only kills people based on this code that his father taught him. And this code is only kill if you have proof that they did the crime and they didn't get convicted in the court system. Like either they can't get arrested or they were acquitted for whatever reason. So like he's got this code. So it's the same kind of thing where like you've got this person that you're cheering for, you want to root for because they're getting rid of the bad people, but they're also really bad.
I think that's the thing, right? Is she taps into that collective rage that women and non-binary people are feeling right now. Every single time, particularly, and it's just rife on college campuses where we hear that line, we're not going to punish him for one mistake. He's got his whole future in front of him.
Yes.
And we've heard that so many times. And I think she has tapped into this collective rage when the system is not serving us, which it is not.
Right.
When the system and the general public do not believe women. I think what she's done here with this novel is say, well, then guess what we're going to do?
Right.
Every woman I know has experienced
something.
A version of things that happened in this book. I think what she's saying is, well, here's the logical next step is eventually women are going to burn all this shit down.
Layne Fargo, her first book that she wrote, Temper, is also, it's along those lines of like a man crossing lines and a woman kind of taking back the power. And so I think I just am drawn to books like that in general. Like Pretty Girls, like I was just talking about, that's the same kind of vein. The Collective by Alison Galen, one of my other favorite books along the same vein. It's just this idea of women saying, we're not going to sit back anymore and we are going to do something and we're taking charge. I think it's a safe way to funnel anger and rage.
Yes. In a way, now that you say it that way, it's the flip side of romance, right? Like romance is always criticized as being pure fantasy, which it is. And this is the flip side of women's fantasy. For revenge.
Right.
The other way.
That's totally fair because I'll read romance now and then, but I don't like to because it gets me stressed out. And then I'm like, my husband, like I always like, oh, they have realistic expectations on him and all these things. Like, it's just better that I don't, because then I don't get mad at him. Because like, he's not going to ever live up to like some female author's like idea of what a man's going to be like. But I think that you're totally right. Like it is this fantasy, like in all reading and fiction reading, it's all fantasy, right? It's all fake, all made up. It's all like our internal desires or thoughts or fears or whatever. And I think that, being able to read fictional books about strong protagonist women who are taking back the power through their own means is really intriguing.
Even if that means is the very method that men traditionally use. You know, that was the thing I kept thinking.
I like the subversion of that, like that it is the way that men do it. So, you know, because traditionally, like in true crime, most female serial killers are like angels of death, like your nurse, right? Or they're the Black Widow and they're poisoning. So what I love about this is that she does a little bit of that, but she does not everything is done that way. Like she actually straight up like kills people with a belt and with a, at one point she talks about how she did it with a gun and she did it with like knives and things like that. Like she's indiscriminatory in what she uses as her methods, which is, you know, very a traditionally masculine kind of thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like women can do it too, you know?
Since you read a lot more crime and thriller and psychological thriller than I do, how did you feel about the twist, which we can't address?
I loved it.
Okay. Did you see it coming? Because I did not. Oh,
nope. It blew me away, and I loved it. I loved everything about that mid-level twist. It was like, oh, and yeah, so good.
I like when twists come midway because it changes what you've already read, but then you go, it's almost like you're starting the book anew and you're like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? With a totally
different perspective or like where, it's so
it was
cool.
Well placed. And I would have expected that to come at the end.
I like that it was midway because it just changes the way that you read the rest of the book. Was it graphic for you? Did you feel like it was like too violent?
This one was not. The assaults that happened, I was able to steel myself and go, okay, I know where this one's going to go. And it wasn't graphic descriptions of the assaults. It was very upsetting still, but it wasn't so much that it freaked me out or made me lose sleep.
Right.
And the violence, I would say the violence is more on her side. And that scared me too.
Yeah.
So, and normally it's unbalanced the other way where it's always sexual assault against women and there's no payback. There's no turnaround. And in this case, it was all going the opposite direction. And like I said, it kept throwing me like I kept wondering, am I happy that this is happening? And no, I'm not happy that there's violence happening, but I'm kind of not unhappy.
Well, see, meanwhile, I was like, yes, get him! Get him!
It's a confusing reaction for me. Like, don't you stop and go, I am not supposed to be happy that someone's violent.
I have friends that have to remind me sometimes, like, you really need to not be so excited about murder. And I'm like, I can't, listen, I really am, especially if women are committing it. I don't know what it is. I'm just real into it. So
listen, we are pissed off and we are exhausted.
Yes. What the hell? It's enough is enough. And it's like, what I also find interesting, I even love the books that are like women that are doing these like terrible other things to other women, but like these other women are just like bad. Like they're just mean-spirited mean girls kind of thing. So I'm thinking about like The Last Mrs. Parrish by Constantine. Have you read that?
I have. It was one of the first episodes of this show, actually.
Okay. So, like that book is an excellent, like, women doing bad things to other women, but it's not overly graphic and violent and had great twists in it. But it was like this, you know what? No, you actually kind of deserved it. So I don't feel so bad. I think that there's just this whole fiction allows us to explore things that we obviously would not do in real life in a way that can be very freeing.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like I sound like I'm a serial killer. I'm not.
No, I think you're exactly right. If I read a book about her, about Scarlett, and she was a real person, I would be horrified and sick and I would have nightmares. I would get very in my feelings. I would start texting people like the world is such a terrible place. And reading this, you do just sort of get to toy with those thoughts of, well, what is the answer then? You tell me the answer. If you're so upset about it, dude, tell me the answer. Because there is not an answer for us right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same feeling you get with romance.
Yeah. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together since I was 16.
Oh
so
my
like
gosh.
we're over 20 years now. He
Yeah.
didn't have to really do a lot of romancing me at 16. You know, we kind of just,
That's right.
started dating. So that's why I'm like, oh, it's not really fair for you. Like, you never, like, you have to give me all of these things. Why don't you write me poetry? Because, like, no.
So I guess what we're saying is these books are okay because we know they're fantasies. And we only have to worry about the readers who can't distinguish. Is that what we're saying? I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's what I think so. I mean, fiction is supposed to be for freedom, right? Like, it is where we get lost in stories, or we see ourselves in stories, or we see a part of ourselves that we don't even recognize in stories. I think that's a lot of, like, you know, this whole book ban thing that's kind of going on right now is so devastating to see, because there was so much work being done to try to give representation in literature. And then we're seeing people saying, no, that's not okay. The whole idea is that fiction is a way that you can escape your life and your reality. That's why I don't read cry books, because I don't feel happy. Like, it's so, my life, you know, my mom's got Alzheimer's. I've got all kinds of shit that's going on in my own life that's sad enough. I don't want to spend my time there, even though I'm sure these are beautiful books. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, like, this is what I like. I like horror. Like, people like horror. Some people like, you know, alien sex, as we learned. And, like, that's not for me, but good for you. Like, I think it's good that you're able to do that. And I don't think that we should be banning any books. They're not harmful. It's not harmful to people. It's not a harmful rhetoric. I know I've had so many hard times in my life where I was able to escape, and it was because of books. And I just think, like, taking anything away from anyone, particularly a kid that could be having an escape or something that makes them feel seen or whatever, is just wrong. It's just not okay.
Amen.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. I want to tattoo everything you just said across my forehead. So tell me, Olivia, what are you reading right now?
Interestingly enough, I am reading a female serial killer.
What an incredible shock.
Wow. No, but actually, I started rereading Heartsick by Chelsea Cain, which is about a female serial killer in Portland. And
is it fiction?
It's fiction. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's, like, a whole series and stuff, but I'm reading it because I'm going to do a feature of it on the podcast. So I'm doing that right now. And then I will be reading What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall for my Thrillers by the Book Club Seattle chapter. That's our book for this month. And then I'm in another book club, and they don't always do thrillers. They're doing Legends and Lattes.
Like, what is that?
It's a cozy fantasy. It's basically, somebody said, like, describe it as Dungeons and Dragons meets Animal Crossing. Oh my God. It is so cute.
Sounds so fun.
It sounds so fun. So yeah, I'm going to read that this month as well. But it's hilarious. It's another side note. It is very, very common for me to be listening to these graphic, terrible crime audiobooks playing Animal Crossing. And I'm just like, let me see. I'm going to go talk to my little Poppy, my little squirrel. And then they're like, and though she was decapitated and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just doesn't compute. But I'm a walking contradiction, as I say. So
I think that a lot about audiobooks. Sometimes I will be listening to them, like, when I'm at the grocery store or what have you. And, you know, I pass by someone and, you know, hi, how are you? Have a nice day. And I think, if you could hear the sex going into my ear, because I'll be listening to some erotic, and I have to go, Julie, keep your mouth shut so you don't blurt out what you just heard.
Yeah, don't say it, because that happens, right?
Cock.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. See, so I can't do romance on audiobook because it freaks me out.
No, totally.
I'm exactly afraid of that. I'm like, meanwhile, they could talk about, like, all kinds of terrible, violent things, and I'm fine. But, like, oh no, they're talking about sex, and I'm like, I can't. Like, nobody look. Don't look at me.
Olivia, this has been so much fun talking to you. Will you share with our guests where they can find you in all the spots online?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Olivia Day Books, and my website is oliviadaybooks.com. And you can find all my socials on there, as well as the Thrillers by the Book Club podcast, which is available on all podcast networks. And our Instagram is at Thrillers by the Book Club pod.
Well, this has been great fun. I hope you will come back anytime you have a book you want to tell me about.
I would love to. I'm sure that I'm going to find another thriller that I'm just going to be like, Julie, I'm going to need to make her read this. This might be like a fun game now. So I want to like be careful.
Oh God. Are you going to keep pushing it farther every time?
See, how far can we go like out of her comfort zone? And then you can do the same for me and be like, here's this book. Read this romance. See how you feel.
Okay. You've got a deal. Like the more you freak me out, the more I'm going to freak you out.
Sounds great.
Bookworms, I'm so eager to hear if you've read this book and what you thought of it. Let me know over on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. Links to everything Olivia and I discussed are available in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to my weekly podcast newsletter at bestbookeverpodcast.substack.com. It's a great way to support this podcast, learn more about my guests, and get a little peek into what I'm reading, listening to, and obsessing over. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, I will see you at the library.